always knew my place in the family. It was in the background, a supporting role in the grand production of my sister's life. For 35 years, I accepted it. I made peace with the shadows. But on the night of my parents' 40th wedding anniversary, in a room filled with everyone I was supposed to call family, my father handed me a script I refused to read. The restaurant was buzzing. Laughter, clinking glasses, the warm glow of what looked like a perfect family. I was sitting there, smiling my practiced smile, watching my sister Jill hold court. An uncle was asking her about some business award she was up for. Business Woman of the Year. She gave this humble little wave, talking about understanding the client's soul. My mother beamed at her like she'd just discovered electricity. "She's always had that gift," Mom said, and her eyes flicked to me for just a second, just long enough for me to feel the chill. I decided to try. One more time. I cleared my throat. "Speaking of business," I said, "I finally finished that deep dive into the store's accounts." The table got a little quieter. My dad looked up from his steak, annoyed. I laid it out. How their two main clothing lines were bleeding cash, how the data showed a pivot to home goods could boost their profits by 15%. I had the supplier list right on my phone. Jill let out this soft, condescending laugh. "Home goods? Anna, our brand is fashion. It's about aspiration. You can't reduce everything to a spreadsheet." My dad grunted in agreement, not even looking at me. "Jill's right. We're not changing the whole store because of some percentages. She's launching a new loyalty program. That's the future." I felt my face get hot. "It's not just percentages, Dad. It's survival." But my mom cut in with that forced, cheerful voice. "Can we please not talk shop at the anniversary dinner? Jill, tell everyone about the gala." And just like that, the conversation swept back to her. I looked down at my lap, my knuckles white around my napkin. The humiliation was a physical heat on my skin. I'd spent 3 weeks on that analysis. I'd been the one propping up their aspirational store for 10 years. $1,000 of my own money, every single month, wired from my salary as a corporate strategist. I was the one who handled the audit last year that saved them from ruin, and all I ever got was silence. Or worse, public dismissal. Then my dad stood up, tapping his glass. The room fell silent. He said beautiful things about my mom, his rock for 40 years. Then his gaze landed on Jill, filled with so much pride it was almost painful to watch. "And we've been blessed with a daughter who has made us prouder than we ever thought possible," he said. "She's a legacy we always dreamed of." He paused and his eyes shifted. They locked directly onto me. His voice hardened. "To be honest, sometimes we wonder what our lives would have been like if we just had the one perfect child." You could hear a pin drop. An aunt dropped her fork. The clatter echoed. Jill didn't smirk. She gave me this small, pitying smile as if to say, "I'm sorry he said it out loud." My mom just looked at her plate. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, cold clarity wash over me, extinguishing all the heat. This was it. The final, undeniable truth served as a dinner toast. Slowly, I placed my napkin on the table. I stood up. Every eye in the room was on me. "I hope you all have a lovely evening," I said, my voice quiet but steady. I didn't look at any of them. I turned and walked out. The click of my heels on the polished floor was the only sound. It was the sound of a door closing. Forever. The Chicago air outside was cold. It felt clean. As I stood on that sidewalk, watching the happy, blurred figures inside, I didn't feel rage anymore. I felt resolve. For years, I had been the foundation of their house, the one buried deep in the dirt, holding everything up while they admired the pretty shutters Jill had painted. That night, I decided to stop being the foundation. I decided to let the house fall. Back in my apartment, it was dark and quiet. I sat on my sofa, a single lamp on. I picked up my phone. My hand was perfectly steady. It took me less than 60 seconds. I opened the family group chat, the one filled with years of Jill's triumphs and my mother's forwarded quotes, and I typed 3 sentences. I am resigning as your silent partner. Effective immediately, all financial support and business consulting cease. You are on your own. My finger hovered over the send button for a single heartbeat. Then I tapped it. I didn't feel a thrill. I didn't feel guilt. I felt quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a long, loud war. I turned off my phone. I knew the storm was coming, but for the first time, I wasn't going to be the one building the ark for them. The panic was immediate, desperate. By morning, my personal phone was lit up with dozens of missed calls. My father's voicemails shifted from blustering anger to thinly veiled fear. Anna, this is ridiculous. Call me back. We need to discuss the vendor payment due next week. My mother's texts were masterclasses in guilt. You're tearing this family apart over a misunderstood comment. And Jill's message was just one word: pathetic. I deleted them all. They didn't understand. This wasn't a negotiation. This was an eviction. I had evicted them from my life, from my bank account, from my keys. But Jill wasn't one to surrender the spotlight. A few days later, the Facebook notifications started popping up. I opened it during a work break. She'd posted a long, vague status. Funny how some people claim to be self-made, but are really just bitter and jealous. True success comes from character, not from stabbing your own family in the back. Dozens of comments from relatives and family friends were piling up. So sorry you're going through this. Some people just can't handle your light. She didn't use my name. She didn't have to. Our entire world knew. She was painting her narrative, casting me as the unstable, jealous sister. And the family was eating it up. This was her weapon. Lies wrapped in the flag of family. I closed the app and looked out my office window at the Chicago skyline. A simple withdrawal wasn't going to be enough. If they were going to burn my reputation to the ground to keep themselves warm, I needed a fireproof plan. It was time to visit the one person in my family who had never looked through me, the one person who valued justice over peace. It was time to go see my grandfather. My grandfather, Walter, wasn't a man of many words. He was a man of land, of property, of concrete things you could build on. He'd built his life from nothing in the Arizona desert. I wasn't going to ask him for money. I was going to give him the truth. And I knew with a cold certainty what he would do with it. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe. The Arizona heat hit me like a wall when I stepped off the plane. It was a dry, clean heat, so different from the heavy damp of Chicago. It felt like a purification. I rented a car and drove to my grandfather's modest ranch-style house on the outskirts of Phoenix. He was waiting for me on the porch, just as I knew he would be. He stood up as I pulled in, his frame still tall and strong despite his age, his face a roadmap of a hard-lived life. "You've got that look," he said, his voice a low rumble. No hello, no small talk, just straight to the heart of the matter. That was Grandpa Walter. "What's broken?" We sat in his living room, the hum of an old swamp cooler filling the space between my words. And I told him everything. I started with the anniversary dinner. I told him how my dad stood there, glass in hand, and told a room full of our family that he wished my sister was his only child. I described the dead silence, the dropped fork, the way Jill had looked at me with pity. I told him about the $1,000 a month for 10 years. I told him about the late nights spent fixing their books, negotiating with suppliers, the audit I handled that saved them from massive fines. I told him how every idea I had was ignored until Jill repeated it, how every accomplishment of mine was met with a shrug. Then I showed him my phone. I pulled up Jill's Facebook posts, the comments from our relatives calling me bitter and jealous. I showed him the text messages, the voicemail transcripts I'd saved. Grandpa listened. He didn't interrupt, but as I spoke, I saw his hands, rough and calloused from a lifetime of work, clench into fists on his knees. His jaw tightened. When I finished, the room was silent except for that old cooler. He stood up and paced over to the window, looking out at his dusty, sun-baked land. "They said that to you?" he asked, his back to me. "In front of God and everybody?" I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He turned around and his eyes were like flint. "That's not family, Anna. That's a betrayal." He sat back down, leaning forward, his gaze intense. "I've seen it, the way they dote on that girl. I thought it was just foolishness, but this is a sickness." He stood up again decisively. "I'm calling Ben." Ben was his lawyer. Within an hour, a brisk man in a suit who looked out of place in the rustic home was sitting with us, a leather portfolio on his lap. Grandpa didn't mince words. "Ben, I'm changing the will. My son, his wife, and his eldest daughter are to be removed. Entirely. They get nothing." He pointed a finger at me. "Everything, the land, the properties, the investments, goes to Anna, and set aside a portion for the veterans charity in town." He looked at me, and for the first time, his eyes softened. "You've earned it. Not for what you've done, but for who you are, for the character they were too blind to see." I didn't say a word. I just felt this immense, quiet weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, truly seen. Grandpa didn't stop there. He had Ben take notes on the financial support I'd given my parents. "They'll crash without you," he said to me, not with pity, but with a grim certainty. "Let them." I nodded. I knew he was right. The store was a house of cards, and I had stopped being the wind holding it up. I flew back to Chicago the next day, my resolve forged in the Arizona sun. I didn't return a single call. I didn't check a single email. The store was no longer my problem. Let them deal with the vendors I'd pacified and the tax laws I'd navigated. I felt lighter. I'd shed a weight I'd been carrying for a lifetime. Back in my own life, I focused on the people who mattered. My friend Sarah, who met me for coffee and just listened, her quiet support a balm. And Mark, a man I'd been starting seeing, an architect with a quiet confidence who made me feel valued for my mind, not my utility. With them, I built a circle that felt like home, not a battlefield. Meanwhile, their world began to crumble. It started slowly, then all at once. Without my monthly $1,000, the bills piled up. Suppliers, tired of late payments, cut them off. The tax audit I warned them about finally hit, and without my meticulous records, the penalties were devastating. The bank foreclosed on the store. I heard about it from a cousin, not from them. Jill's big loyalty program launch died with the business. Her Businesswoman of the Year nomination quietly disappeared. Her lies on Facebook backfired when a few relatives, finally suspicious, started asking questions. An aunt found old emails proving I'd been sending money for years. The family gossip turned. The comments on Jill's post became questions, then accusations. "You lied about her," one cousin wrote. "She carried you all." She tried to delete the evidence, but it was too late. My parents' downfall was just as complete. The store's income was gone. The second mortgage they'd taken out on their house became a millstone. They missed payments. The bank seized the house, the home they'd lived in for 30 years. They moved into a cramped little apartment. Relatives who once cheered them now avoided them. Their phone calls went unanswered. Grandpa stayed firm. He'd heard about the collapse, but never reached out. I received a handwritten letter from him confirming the new will was signed and sealed. "It's done," he wrote. "They won't get a cent." When my mother called him, begging, he simply said, "You made your bed," and hung up. My father was too proud, or too ashamed, to even try. I didn't gloat. I just kept moving forward. My career thrived. I landed a major promotion, building something real and lasting, something that was entirely mine. My life wasn't about proving myself to them anymore. It was about living for me. The lesson was hard, but it was clear. Cherish the people who see you, not the ones who look through you. For years, I chased a family that didn't exist. I gave them everything, and they gave me nothing but scars. Letting go wasn't about punishment. It was about survival. It was about finally choosing myself. And in the quiet that followed, I found a peace I never knew was possible.